I believe. And my first business that I started at the age of 20 in England, that was very unsatisfying. In a way, it was a lot of fun. It was computer games. I was young, I was 20 years old. And within a few years, I was going to work by helicopter. I had a Ferrari, Porsche, BMWs, everything I could dream of. But a life felt very empty. And I started to understand this difference between pleasure and happiness. You know, pleasure always has a price tag. New car or new clothes or something to feel good. But whatever you buy, after a little while, you become bored of it and you need something else. And so that's not happiness. Happiness comes from your relationships, knowing that you're fulfilling God's purpose with your life. And what I found in my first business was that it brought out all the worst in me. And those of you who are working, you may encounter this as well. All my greed, all my selfishness, you know, self-righteousness, anger, all of these things would come out in the workplace. And so I kind of realized there was something wrong. And quite often, because my business was successful and I was quite young, people would write to me and say that they thought that what I was doing was very inspiring. And deep inside, I'd be thinking, well, why? I'm just this greedy, selfish person. What's inspiring about that? And I found myself one day, I was in the Beverly Hills Hotel at a conference, a computer game conference in America. And I remember I just got down on my knees at the side of the bed and I prayed, Lord, why am I rich? Why did you bless me? It all feels so wrong. And I felt like I was not doing anything good with my life. I was just selling computer games. It just felt as though I didn't deserve anything I had. I was not doing anything good, but here I was with everything I could want. And so I started to pray again, and God eventually led me to the Philippines. I went all over the world actually looking for things I could do to help. And it was eventually a friend of mine from the Philippines who told me about Gawad Kalinga. And I didn't know much about the Philippines. All I knew was Abu Sayyaf and Imelda's shoes and Smoky Mountain. That's all I'd heard about the Philippines. But I thought, well, I'll go and have a look. And what I saw when I first visited Gawad Kalinga blew my mind. It was the first time I was visiting places that used to be slums, but now they were beautiful, they were peaceful communities. The children were in school. There was no more drinking in the streets. And I came to believe these places would never go back to being slums again. The more I talked to the people that were living there and saw the hope in them and everything. And so I wanted to help. I got back home to England after a few days of visiting Gawad Kalinga. The first thing I saw when I got home was the brand new BMW I just bought a few weeks before. And looking at my car, I really felt sick in my stomach. And I remember walking around the car, kicking the wheel, thinking, wow, that's 2 houses, just that wheel. You know, the CD player, 1 house, the cost of a house. And I really couldn't drive it and enjoy it in the same way anymore. So I sent an email to the head of Gawad Kalinga, Tony Melotto, and said, I've decided I'm going to sell my car and I want to send you the money. Please let me know where I should send it. But his answer changed my life. He said, if you really want to help, please don't just give your money. Why don't you come back and you help to build those houses? Learn more about what we're doing. And so I came back. That was in April 2003. I was supposed to stay 6 weeks. That was 17 years ago. I fell in love with Gawad Kalinga, fell in love with the Philippines, eventually fell in love with Tony Melotto's daughter, who's now my wife. And so this has now become home to me. And all of those things have gone. Over the next few years, I started giving away the money that I had. I sold the cars and everything. And little by little, we gave it, pretty much all of it away over the next few years. And that was not just something that I decided to do, but it was really the fruit of prayer also. As I was, sometimes I would get worried. I would be giving away all this money, and then we started having children. And I remember a few times praying, Lord, I see these people, I know they need help, but Lord, I'm a bit worried about the future. And every time I would feel him saying, just keep doing what's right, keep doing what's right, and I'll take care of you. And so When we'd given away almost everything, that's when my wife Anna had the idea for starting Human Nature. And we didn't know anything about what we were doing. We were not scientists or formulators. We'd never done manufacturing or anything like that. And yet she had this very strong desire with her sister Camille to start this company. And so we didn't know what we were doing. So we just got on our knees and prayed. That was the natural thing for us. Since we don't know what we're doing, let's go to the one who knows what we should do. And we just offered Human Nature to God from the beginning. And so these things which I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you a few policies that we have in Human Nature that make us a bit different to most companies. And we don't have these policies because we had a lot of money back then. It had almost all gone. We actually had 3 million pesos left, which still sounds like a lot of money, but we spent all of it starting Human Nature. We had nothing in reserve. And so I even had to borrow some money from my mother-in-law at one point when we had a cash flow problem in the early years of Human Nature. So we decided to base the company really on Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And so the first thing that was really in our hearts when we started Human Nature was that we wanted it to bring people out of poverty. That's what we've been doing for years in Gawad Kalinga, helping to transform the lives of the poor. And I remembered when we were starting Human Nature, I remembered something I'd seen the day after I arrived in the Philippines for the very first time. I'd been staying at a hotel in Makati, and as I came out of my hotel in the morning, there was a big rally of employees of one of the big businesses there, hundreds of them in the streets. And I asked my friend, what's going on? Why are these people rallying? And she said, because they're not regularized, no sick pay, no vacation leave, and that kind of thing. And I was so shocked because in England, where I come from, that's illegal. You can't do that. If you need a person to do that job, that person must be regularized in that job. And I remember praying at that moment, Lord, if ever there's anything I can do to help with this, let me know. And that sort of came back to my head. And so we decided right from the beginning, we would not have any contractual employment in Human Nature. They would all be regularized. And we would not pay the minimum wage because the minimum wage was not enough. And so if we want the Philippines not to be poor, then that means the people must no longer be poor. And the only way that they will stop being poor is if they're earning enough to come out of poverty. It always amazed me going through the slums, going through Gawad Kalinga villages, that many of the people there, you know, first of all, they were intelligent people. Most of them speak 3 languages. They speak Tagalog, they speak English, and the language of their province. In England, if you speak 3 languages, you're a genius. That's how they would think of you. And secondly, there were accountants in the slums. There were teachers, nurses, policemen, you know, all sorts of people that you would think, or I would think, are professional people, and yet they were living in the slums. And I realized no matter how hard you work, if you're in a low-paid job, you're going to be there in the slum forever. And so we made that decision at the beginning that we would try to pay the living wage. So back then, 11 years ago when we started, the minimum wage was 384 a day, and we were paying 500. So it was a little bit more. But today, the minimum wage is still 500 something, 537, I think, or something in Metro Manila. So the minimum that Human Nature pays now is 22,500 pesos a month, 1,039 pesos a day. So almost double the minimum wage. Because if we really want people out of poverty, it's business that's going to do that. Business is more powerful than government. Business employs more people than government. Business combined has more money than government. And so it's going to be business that brings people out of poverty, but it will only happen if those employers are able to pay a decent salary. So remember, we made that decision before we'd sold a single product. It's not that we were sitting on big sales and therefore we thought we will inch the salaries up. No, right from the beginning, we were paying, you know, 30% more than minimum wage. And we just tried to improve it as time went on. And so there's a verse in the Bible also, Proverbs 19:17, that says, when you give to the poor, you're lending to the Lord, and the Lord will repay you. And I always took that as a literal promise from God, that if we give to the poor, even if we're not obliged to under the law, but we do it, then God will repay us. And he's proven faithful to us for the last 11 years. I'll just share a couple of other policies we have with you. One is no work on Sunday. So this seems like a suicidal policy for us because we have most of our sales come through stores. And for 9 years, we could not open in the malls because, of course, to be in the mall, you have to open on Sunday. And so if I don't want to work on Sunday, I can't force my people to work on Sunday. So for me, it's a no-no. And so for 9 years, we could not open in the malls. Eventually, 2 years ago, SM came to us and he said, okay, we've decided we want you in the malls. We want Human Nature there with your stores. And so we will allow you to close on Sunday, but we will charge you a penalty. I said, okay, I'll take it. Just to be able to put our stores in the malls, we will take it. So every Sunday now we close and we pay a penalty so that our people can go home and not have to work. And so it's again something God put in my heart early on, that the Sabbath is very important, that family life is very important. And when I was a kid growing up in England, it was illegal to open on Sunday. All the stores were closed. Then when I was maybe 10 or 12 years old, the law changed. Stores began to open, and I saw a lot of families drifting apart. Maybe somebody in the family was working now, the mom or the dad, or somebody was doing the grocery. Others were going to the cinema. So the families were no longer close on Sunday. They were all doing their own thing. And so we've had that since the beginning as well. And again, I felt God was faithful to us 2 years ago when we now are able to be in the malls, but we don't have to open Sunday. Another policy we have that most business people think is a crazy policy, we have a no firing policy in Human Nature. You've probably never heard of such a thing. But if God does not give up on me with all the mistakes I make, then I should not give up on the people he sends to Human Nature. And this is something I have to remind myself of constantly, because it's very easy when you're the boss, when you're the employer, to get upset when people make mistakes. And like I said, business tends to bring out the worst in many people, including me, especially me. And so I've decided to publicly declare this policy, no firing policy. You know, we exist as a company to get people out of poverty. So if someone's making a mistake, they are a reason for being. There was another thing that happened to me a few weeks after I'd arrived in the Philippines. I was taken to a wake of a guy. He was a teenager, I think about 17 or 18 years old. And he used to be a gang member. He was akyat bahay. He was a hold-upper on buses. And he even killed people for money. And he was able to change. When Gawad Kalinga went into his area, he laid down his weapons, he turned away from the gang, and he was able to get a job in a candle factory. Anyway, sometime later, he lost his job, he was fired. And he thought to himself, his only option to survive now was to go back to the gang. And so rather than go back to the gang, he decided that everybody would be better off if he was not there. And so he decided to shoot himself. Just 18 or 19 years old. And because he got fired, he decided to end his life. And that always stuck with me. And so the thing is, when you work with the poor, they believe they're useless. All their lives they've been told, you're nothing, you're rubbish, you're disposable, and they believe it. And so when we're able to say to our employees in Human Nature, you're family to us now, we will never turn our back on you. You will have a job here because you're our family. That means something to them. And a lot of people think if you don't fire people, why will they work? If they know they won't be fired, then they won't bother working. But it's actually the opposite. When people know that you will not give up on them, you're doing your best to help them, they also want to give their best. And I've seen many, many times over the years, people who made big mistakes, who perhaps should have been fired in many other companies, we were able to turn them around. And so we don't do it with babying. I also believe in tough love. If you're late to work, many times in Human Nature, we're going to send you to a farm in Bulacan, and you're going to start work at 4 a.m. until you start coming on time. And then you'll be allowed to go back. You'll be able to go back to the office or the warehouse. So we have a policy of tough love, but the bottom line is we don't give up on people. And our employees know that. So, you know, I learned this from my mom, because my mom was an alcoholic. My mom was a drug addict for many years. And yet she had a miraculous transformation. It took her 20 years. but she was able to turn it around. And that taught me, with God's help, it was really a miracle. I prayed for her for years and years and years. And eventually it was a miracle. Just one day she was able to stop, like flicking a switch. And that taught me that nothing's impossible with God and nobody is beyond help. And so it taught me never to give up on people. So maybe there's somebody you want to give up on today. Maybe it's a relative or an employee, maybe even yourself. Don't do it. But God can really help all of those people. So these are some of the policies we have. There was another verse that really hit me a few years into human nature. It was John 10:10, and it's where Jesus says, I came so that they should have life and have it more abundantly. And I read this, I was sitting at my desk, it was about 8 p.m. at night. I read it and I looked out across the office and I saw there were about 10 people still in the office, 8 p.m. And I read it again. I came so that they should have life and have it more abundantly. And I got cut, to the heart. I thought, oh my goodness, is this the kind of life I'm giving? They're all working themselves to death. And again, I went into a time of prayer and really came to see that as the employer also, it's my responsibility to try to limit the hours that people have to put in. And so now our official hours in human nature before COVID were 7 hours a day. So 9 till 5 or 10 till 6 or 8 till 4. Those were our official hours. Since COVID, things have been a little more confusing, but we're not in normal times at the moment. But that's generally what we aim for. We give a wedding benefit. I found out a lot of our people were living together and not married, even if they wanted to get married. And it was because they couldn't afford the lechon and everything else that they think they're supposed to have. So we now give a wedding benefit. We give a child benefit when children are born to any of our employees, whether they're the mother or the father. They get a 10,000 peso child benefit to help with those early needs. We have another policy of no lagay. People told us at the beginning this is impossible in the Philippines. And it's true, it's very hard. There are times when we really have to wait. There are times when we really get, pushed around. But 11 years, we've never paid lagay. And so it will be inconvenient, but it's possible. And so when I explain these things, a lot of business people think, oh, this is too idealistic. This can never work in the real world. And then they see how big we are. So right now we're 640 employees, all earning almost double the minimum wage at the least. But I think human nature proves that the Philippines can be different. The business in the Philippines can be different. And it proves more than that God is faithful. When we started, we knew nothing, like I said at the beginning, but we just put our faith into action and we chose to trust the Bible. And I really believe this is the most amazing way to spend your career, to offer your business to God. And that's what we've tried to do for 11 years in human nature. Somebody asked me once, why do you think God blessed human nature? And I thought about it and I thought, well, honestly, I believe it's because he found a group of people willing to do it his way. When he says, no work on the Sabbath, we'll close on the Sabbath. When he says, take care of the poor, we'll take care of the poor. And we've just been willing all along to believe his book, to believe in God's character, these promises that he makes, that he is faithful, he is truthful. When he says that he promises this, he will do this, that he will actually do it. But many people sadly don't believe that God is that way. They believe God does nothing to help them throughout their whole life and then just judges them at the end. And I don't think anyone could love a God like that. But thankfully, that's not the God of the Bible. And he is a powerful, personal, loving, faithful God. And the Bible, I believe, is a living, up-to-date, powerful, true book. And so that's how I've tried to build my life. And that's how we've tried to build human nature, believing the Bible and putting it into action. And so how about you? How are you going to try to change the country? I used to think when I first came, for the first few years I was in Gawad Kalinga, I used to think what we really need is heroism. We really need people to stand up and just be heroes for the country. But I've changed my mind over the years. I've come to think it's not heroism that will change the country. It's not our education or our intelligence or even our business skills, but it is first our humble obedience that will change the Philippines. Obedience to God's ways. And if we decide to really put God first, that's when we'll see the Philippines start to rise, and especially our businesses, when we start to do them truly, genuinely for Him. And so I hope that helps. I don't want to give you the impression that it's all great in human nature. It's very, very hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And for several years there, maybe around 5 years out of the last 11 years, I just wanted to quit. I wanted to give up, go back to England, because it was very, very hard. I mean, here in the Philippines, the government doesn't really help you. Where I come from, the government's very helpful. My first business, starting that, it was so easy. You know, computer games in England was so easy compared to human nature in the Philippines. And many times I would go home and I would just say to my wife, Anna, we can't do it. I can't do it anymore, love. Let's just go back to England. Let's try it in England for 6 months or a year. But then when I sat down and I prayed, I felt strong. I knew God wanted us here. God wants us to stay. It's going to be okay. He told me once, don't look back. Don't look back. Stop looking back to what you knew before. That's not relevant anymore. But concentrate on what you're doing today. And so, you know, we look at the Philippines, and especially with COVID, it looks like there's so much reason to lose hope or, you know, just be sad about the state of the country. But as believers in God, we're triumphant people. We are the victors. And that's what we've got to remember. When you read the Bible, at the end, the good guys win. You get all the way to the end, the good guys win. And I believe it's times like this, dark times, difficult times, where God wants us to stand up and say, yep, I know it's difficult, but I'm here for you, Lord. And just show me what to do. And off I go. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take questions. I'm not sure if that's what you wanted to hear about, but...
Oh, thank you so much for that. But before we proceed, I'd like to welcome Dr. Margie Clavano, the Assistant Dean of our SBG Graduate School. Dr. Marge, good evening and welcome to our class.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Sir Dr. Rowie and Mom Myra Anwi. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We'd like to ask if you have questions for Sir Dylan Wilk. Now is the time, you know, if you have questions for him. Sir, I have a question. I read in your website that you want to help your employees to become the best that they can be. And our class is about Ignatian leadership, how Ignatius of Loyola built his society, and he crafted leaders from his recruits. How do you do it?
Okay, very good question. Well, we do a multi-pronged approach. Of course, there are the usual training in terms of professional training, but that's really not enough. When you're working with the poor and they come from the slums, they bring slum habits, slum behavior, slum mentality. Their whole lives, they haven't seen, most of them, a good role model. The people that they see succeeding in their communities are often the people that do things the wrong way, not the right way. And so it takes time. And the way that we've been able to do it is that we have, first of all, an incredible set of leaders in human nature. And we choose them not based on their professional expertise. For a little while we did, and I realized it was not working. We choose them a combination of their heart for people and their professional expertise. And so if I have two candidates, that I'm choosing between, and one seems to be better at the work, but less of a people person, then I will choose the one who shows genuine compassion, genuine caring for people, who maybe is not quite as good at the work. Because when you're bringing out the best in the poor, you have to really build trust with them in order for them to really believe that they can do it and to want to give their best. It starts with the leaders. We have a big HR team. We're 600 people, and we have about 40 people in our HR department. Wow. And a lot of people are dedicated to training and pastoral care. So every week we have what we call a life skills session. It's basically a mini Bible study, which happens sometimes during lunch break, sometimes during normal work hours, depending on how busy we are. And so they're in small groups, so usually in six, 8 people per group, led by either someone from our HR team, or we also have a couple of chaplains that help with those sometimes. And in the beginning, when we started those, it was a bit awkward. A lot of people didn't want to attend, and they didn't want to open up about what the topic was. But after a little while, 6 months to a year, it really started to bear good fruit. And so I think a lot of it comes down to choosing the right leaders, and they must be people who genuinely care about the employees. We've done other things. I mean, apart from the traditional training and the life skills and that kind of thing, we have occasionally, especially for the men, we would have what we call a Spartan boot camp. And we would send the male employees of Human Nature out to a Gawad Kalinga farm in Bulacan. And for 2 or 3 days, they were basically camping there. They would work in the fields during the day and then have sharing and fellowship at night. Again, just to really strengthen the relationships, and especially the men, because what we often found was the problem was not the women. And we find this a lot in the slums, that no matter how poor they are, the women will try to find a way to take care of their children. But men, when we cannot provide, when we feel like failures, we become the problem. We become the predators, the gang members, the drug addicts, you know. And so we paid special attention to the men when we would employ them to try to really strengthen the right values in them. It's not very difficult working with the women. They will usually respond. But the men can be very hard-headed because that's the culture where they come from, you know, in the slums. So we've been very successful at turning a lot of them around. There was one, he was in his 50s, and we had a really difficult episode. He'd been with us for, I think, about 4 years, one of our very first employees. And he'd been with us for about 4 years. And one day we found out that he was stealing. So what he was doing was he was tasked with doing some minor purchasing of supplies. And when he got the receipts, he would make sure he bought from places that give a handwritten receipt. And then, of course, he would change the amount. He would change a 0 to an 8 or something like that. And then he would pocket the difference. And when we found out, I was so upset because he was a very trusted person. It took me about 3 days before I could even face him. I was so angry. And this is where our no firing policy came from, because I was really praying hard, Lord, what do I do? And I kept just getting the sense, forgive. And I thought, well, what do you mean? I can't just forgive and let him get away with it. What does that mean? That's crazy. And so in the end, I sat him down, and I got the sense that I should not fire him. So I sat him down and I said, I can't understand why you did this. You know that we love you. You know that we've tried to take care of you. I believe you're a good father. And I want you to tell me why you did this to me. And he couldn't even speak. He started to cry. He jumped up and he ran out of the room. And he came back about 2 days later. And he admitted to me, he confessed that he'd been doing this his whole life since being a teenager. Every job he ever had, he would steal. And then when he was caught, he would think, okay, I got my punishment. And he would go get another job and do it again. And this was the first time that when he got home, he could not even look himself in the mirror. He felt so ashamed. And that guy, he's still with us. We don't allow him to touch the money anymore. He doesn't do the purchasing. We trained him to do something else. But he's also changed. He was kind of masungit before. He was, you know, difficult, grouchy person. Now he's happy. He's very helpful. And it really showed me the truth of what God was trying to show me, that if we find the right way of bringing the good out of people, that it's there. And now this takes a lot of dedication. And this is why a lot of businesses don't want to do it. And it's much easier just to fire someone because there are another 100 people anyway that would like a job. But what I can tell you is, I believe this is also why human nature has become so excellent, why we've become so successful, because we did not give up on these people, and we kept working with them until they really did become world class. And the accuracy level in our warehouse now here in the Philippines is much better than it was in my warehouse in England. So we track all mistakes, we track all the accuracy, and our accuracy level here is 99.8%. I never got more than 98.5% in England. So I believe it's because these people now, they want to give their best, and they know this is their only chance, that nobody else will give them a break like this. And I believe when you're working with the poor, if they, for them to want to give their best, they have to have a dream they can really believe in. You can't give them false hope. But if it's genuine hope, and they know my kids are going to be okay, I've got a chance here to provide for my family, to do the very best they can, just like Filipinos do all over the world. OFWs, wherever they go, they succeed, they thrive, they flourish all over the world because they know they've got a chance. But what's missing here in the Philippines for most people is no opportunity. It's going to be minimum wage. And no matter how good you are, no matter how much you work, that's it. But if we give people a little better chance to dream, then we can bring much, much more out of those people.
Thank you for that. And is there anyone who would like to ask Sir Dylan a question?
Myra?
Yes, Sir Rory.
Sir Dylan, well, thank you very much for responding to Myra's invitation, because at the start of the class I was asking, is he your friend? And Myra said, no, I don't personally know him. And why did he reply? I don't know. So we were all really excited for your positive reply for this invitation. Anyway, it's just so maybe it's really a blessing, because just tonight, Myra and his group are reporting about Magis, and Magis in Ignatian terms is about loving more, that the doing more is a consequence of being loved. And I think precisely that's what, I'm not sure if you encountered Ignatius of Loyola or you've been to a Jesuit school, but the things that you're saying fits well with what we are talking about. Ignatian leadership. It talks about what Chris Loney is talking about, heroic leadership. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this book. So I think you're giving flesh to what we are discussing, and honestly, I'm so privileged to have meet you personally here. I can brag to my friends. Oh, he is my friend now. But on a serious note, a few years back, Sir Miloto was our graduation speaker at the graduate level in the Ateneo. So I'm happy to know that he is your father-in-law. Now, my question is, obviously, you have a very strong Christian inclination in the way you run your company. And I think that sets the whole ethos, the whole philosophy of how you run your company, how you deal with people, and so on and so forth. And you mentioned also that the way you treat people is also guided by what the Bible is saying, and is also guided by the fruits of your prayer and discernment. I'm just curious if are there members in your workforce that belong, for example, to Islam, or who are non-Christians, or who are non-believers at all? Are these people from different confessions accepted in your company? And if ever there are sorts of people like that in your company, how do you deal with them? How do you treat them? How do you empower them to maximize their full potential in their respective faith confession?
Okay, thank you, Rory, for the question and for the kind words. I learned a lot of these things from my father-in-law because he's Atenean, and so I didn't learn these things in England. In England, I was raised with the kind of American dream or the Western dream, which is just all self-centered. My house, my car, my career, and so on. It was only when I got to the Philippines I saw the beauty of really living out the Christian faith in a better way. And this is where I learned it. So I learned it in Gawad Kalinga and Couples for Christ, where I was also for a few years. And now in Human Nature, we're able to live it out. So in terms of people of different faiths, You don't have to be a Christian to be in human nature. Although most of our people, I don't think we have any Muslims. We do in General Santos, we have a branch there. So one of our franchisees is Muslim. She runs the branch in General Santos. But in our main company, we have people who are atheists and agnostics. We have Iglesia Ni Cristo, we have Jehovah's Witnesses, we have a whole range. And so there are various points at which our faith intersects with the company. So for example, on Monday mornings, every Monday we have an assembly and we sing a worship song, we pray, but it's optional. Those that don't want to go are not obliged to go. We have every year annual company prayer and fasting week at the start of the year. And again, it's optional. We usually have about a third of the people who attend. The life skills, the weekly Bible study, so far, everybody in our warehouse, which is where we mostly run it, and our merchandiser teams, they are all from a Christian background. We don't have anyone there who's from a non-Christian background. In Gawad Kalinga, we have a lot of work with Muslims in Mindanao. And so we always say to them, we want you to be the best Muslim you can be. We're trying to be the best Christians we can be. We want to help you be the best Muslim you can be. And in fact, there's only one Christian cross in Sulu. And it's one official monument with a cross. And it's at the entrance to the Gawad Kalinga village in Sulu. So the Muslim Datu in that area asked if we would build a marker that had the cross and the crescent side by side to show that Muslims and Christians could work together and live peacefully together. And so that we built that at the request of the Muslim Datu there. And so that's very beautiful. So it's not compulsory, but what we hope is, by people seeing the genuineness of how we try to live it out, that it's not just a doctrine, but it's really lived out, that it will make it more real to people and it will make them, consider it more. And in fact, that's why I responded today, because I just heard about this a few hours ago and I was thinking of not attending because I had another event actually at my church tonight, which is another Zoom event. But when I prayed, I felt God, the thing that came to my mind was always be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. Okay, all right, I'm ready. So that's why I said yes. So you can thank God, not me.
All right. And yes, sir.
So
go ahead.
That's my first question. So I'm giving others a chance to ask questions also, or share their thoughts based on the sharing. So anyone from the class?
Sir, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sir, we've been talking about the it's a great honor to meet you, by the way. It's a very privileged to have you in our class. We've been talking about self-awareness as the foundation of leadership. We've learned about its theories, etc. Now, I want to know more about the application side. How did self-awareness play a role in your leadership style and new success?
Okay, so I'm not very familiar with what you're learning about self-awareness. My if you like, from being a greedy, selfish business person to what we're doing in human nature did come through self-awareness. It came from the knowledge that even though I had everything that I wanted and I tried to do life all my own way, I knew really I was not happy and everything felt wrong. And that's what brought me back to God. And I started to recognize a lot of the things I'd done wrong, my wrong thinking. And I just wanted to go back to God. I just wanted him to take me back and show me a different way of living. And actually, I wanted to go study theology. I was applying to colleges to study theology. And that's when a friend of mine invited me to the Philippines. So that's when I came. And then I felt like this is where God wants to show himself to me in a more real way. So I'm not very familiar with what you're learning about self-awareness, but even today, I think it's important to constantly, how would you say it? To constantly assess yourself. You know, have I done well today or not? Have I hurt anyone today? Where did I mess up? And that's something I try to do every night. And so I often spend a lot of time at night texting people, apologizing. You know, so I'm not sure if that's what you mean by self-awareness, because I haven't really studied.
That's okay, sir. Thank you for the response, sir.
You're welcome.
I have another question. Actually, two questions. I'm really touched now by your sharing tonight, now how you shared to us your beginnings in England and some sort of a story of conversion from selfishness to selflessness, as you put it, as you shared it earlier. I'm really struck by that because I think your personal conversion, your personal conviction, deeply shape, mold what the kind of company that you are running right now, and the kind of people that are working in the company. So my first question is on the personal level. Um, this is again in relation to the discussion of the group this evening, wherein they speak about freedom and unfreedom, attachment and detachment from material things, from desires. So my first question is, given the kind of success that you have reached now, the kind of prestige and fame and respect and commendations, I saw the website, there are so many awards. What's the personal temptation that keeps on bothering you as a head of this company? So that's the first one. How do you deal with it? And then the second question is, um, how do you envision yourself 10, 20, 30 years from now? How do you envision yourself, your family, and human nature 10 or 20 or 30 years from now?
Okay, thank you. Well, the big thing that I always have to fight in terms of temptation is really arrogance. And, you know, I was born to a poor family in England, but being poor in England is different to being poor in the Philippines, because even though my family was poor, I got free education and I won a scholarship to go to a very good school, one of the best schools in the north of England. And so I was always a good student. So I always was told I was intelligent, I was clever, things like that. And that's what I believed. And as my business grew and became very successful in England, all the more I thought it was down to me. And I really became very arrogant. And it was when I'd been in the Philippines, I'd only been here for a few weeks, and something happened that really made me realize how wrong I was. And I was in a restaurant in Makati. I think I was in Shakey's Pizza, having a pizza in Makati, on Makati Avenue, with a friend of mine. And there was a group of teenagers outside, and they were clearly homeless. They were very dirty, no shoes, and they were sniffing rugby, sniffing glue. And I said to my friend, why do they waste their money on that when they're so poor? Why don't they use it for food? And my friend explained to me, because the rugby is cheaper than rice. So when they can't afford rice, they get the rugby instead. And it takes away the hunger in their stomach. And this really shocked me. I'd only been here a short while and eating a pizza in a restaurant, and there were people going hungry right outside the window. And so we paid the bill, and I went outside and I asked them, are you hungry? And they jumped up and they said, oh, yes, we're hungry. So I said, okay, we'd like to take you for some food. Where would you like to go? And they had this little discussion amongst themselves, and they decided Jollibee was the best food they could imagine. So he said, okay, let's go. And there was a Jollibee just down the street. So we took them to Jollibee, but they didn't want to go in. They wanted to stay outside. And they stopped following us. So I said, come with us. They said, well, will you bring the food outside? We'll just eat it here because we're ashamed, because we're so dirty. And I sort of insisted. I said, no, I'd like you to come with us. Come inside. So we got them inside, we brought them their little Jollibee meal each, and when they'd eaten about half the food, they were wrapping up what was left. And so I thought, this is strange, you know, they didn't eat very much. And I asked them, are you full? And they said, one of them said, no, I'm still hungry, but I have a mother and I have a brother, and I want to share this with them. And I was so touched that even though she was still hungry, she was thinking of her family. And just then one of the other girls started to cry. And I asked her, why are you crying? And she said, because I've lived on the streets of Makati all my life, and nobody's ever bought me a meal. And why don't you tell me what you want? And it turned out she was pretty, she was quite pretty, and she thought I wanted to rape her. She thought that was the only reason that I bought them this meal, that I wanted to rape her. And as I looked at her and I saw the tears come down her cheeks, you know, now she was scared because she'd eaten. I suddenly realized that could have been me. You know, if I'd been born to a poor family in the Philippines instead of a poor family in England, it wouldn't matter if I was intelligent or not, but I would still be there on the streets. And that really stuck with me. And that killed my arrogance. It killed my pride. But it still comes back, you know, sometimes. And so that's really the thing that I have to deal with. And luckily, I have a very down-to-earth wife who doesn't let me get away with that. You know, that experience God gave me, I think, just to keep reminding me, hey, you're only here because I put you here. You're only what you are because I did it. So yeah. So that was your first question. I apologize, I forgot your second question. What was the second question?
The second question is, 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, how do you imagine yourself, your family, and human nature?
Okay. Well, I would love human nature to become really a light to other businesses, that other businesses will look at it and think, I want to do that. Other business people in particular who love God. Because what I find is there are many, many good people, but they're just afraid. They think it won't work if they do what God says. They think it's a choice between, you know, their business succeeding or following God. And what I'm really hoping is that human nature will be seen as maybe a template by especially those business people who believe in God and love God at first, to be encouraged and emboldened. In fact, that's our mission statement, to be the gold standard of an enterprise with a heart that will embolden all businesses to better serve society. And so that's my dream, that they look at us. And yeah, COVID at the moment is throwing things out of sync, and hopefully it won't be a long-term issue. At the beginning of COVID, we made the decision, one of the first things we decided was walang iwanan. There will be nobody laid off, and we will all get through this together. And so we announced that right at the beginning. We went through a couple of months where there were hardly any salaries being paid. Everybody was just earning the same 5,000 pesos stipend every 2 weeks. That was the whole company, regardless of salary, regardless of position, for 2 months. But now we've been able to get back to mostly normal salaries. So I hope human nature will get through this intact. I'm sure we will. So that, again, other businesses can look at it and see, well, God is really faithful. God is really faithful. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dylan. I hope others will take this opportunity also to ask questions or just share their thoughts and insights to our guests tonight.
Sorry, excuse me 1 second. Somebody's just waiting for me. Just be a moment.
Okay. I would like to ask Dr. Margie Clavano if you would like to share.
Yes.
Actually, I followed Dr. Margie Clavano from her dining, from her dinner table.
To be honest, I'm not really that prepared, Rowie, for join your class. But I'm
Oh,
so happy for giving me the opportunity, to listen to our speaker. It's an honor and a privilege to be listening to him. But I'm just so grateful for the personal experience of our speaker. It's really parang um he's really exercising what it means to be uh, a true business leader, parang really living the life of what it means to be a true leader in business, believing in humanity, sharing the blessings, and yung sinasabi niya na walang iwanan, that's really something, no? Uh, and following the ways of God, it's really difficult for a business person to do that. And that's what's really what we are trying to teach here in the graduate school, especially in the School of Business and Governance, particularly the MBA program, that we really want to influence our leaders. Yung sinasabi natin, the true vocation of a business leader, that we're not only into profit, but we're looking into the society, taking care of the society, taking care of humanity. So it's good that we have the opportunity to listen to Sir Dylan. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, Sir Rowie. So thank you so much.
thank you, March. That was our Assistant Dean of the Graduate School, Sir Dylan. So I hope,
I want
no?
to ask, actually, I want to ask.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, yes, yes. Go, ask.
I'm just curious, how do you influence other businessmen to follow the ways of human nature?
So that's a great question. Thank you. Um, it's not easy because when we started, and we were still quite small, we were only about 100 employees. I remember I was with Joey Concepcion at a Go Negotio event. He was a big supporter of Gawad Kalinga. And he believed in what we were doing as well. But I remember him saying to me at that time, you can only do these things because you're small. Big businesses can't do these things. Now that we're bigger, we're 600 people, a lot of business people say to me, you can only do it that way because you're big. We can't do that because we're small. So, so people will always look for a way, to get out of it applying to them. And so I try to talk as often as I can to Christian groups, especially Christian business people. And I'm praying that, some of them, and maybe they won't do everything that we've done, but they'll do a little bit more. There's a little group I spoke to last year, and about 6 people only, very small group. And 3 of them increased their minimum wage as a company after the talk. And so, they didn't double it, but they put on like 10%, 15%. And that's already a start. That's a good start. So, that's why if I can talk to groups of business people, I will always try to take that chance, because I think people have to hear this a lot. They have to see it a lot in order to believe it, and not just think, oh, this is just impossible.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Myra.
So, are there other questions from the class? So, sir, I'd like to ask you one last question, and that is, where do you see Philippines in maybe 20, 30 years? You can compare us with other countries. You are here, so you must see something in the Philippines.
Yeah, I do see a lot of good in the Philippines. And it would be easy as a foreigner to come here and just complain about the traffic or the pollution or the corruption. But, very early on, I came to realize there is so much more to the Philippines than that. And when you look with your heart at this country, you see a truly wonderful people just struggling to build a country after 400 years of slavery. And it's going to take time to do that. It's going to take time. We can't compare the Philippines with the USA or with England, but the Filipino is just as good as an American. And that's why I want those words "made in the Philippines" that you see on human nature products to mean just as good as "made in France" or "made in the USA" or "made in England," because a Filipino is just as good. And like I said earlier, wherever the Filipino goes throughout the world, you blossom, you flourish. I saw a report on CNN maybe 10 years ago, and it was saying 10 years ago, Filipinos were the second highest earning group in America. Indians were number one, Filipinos were number two, ahead of the Japanese, ahead of the Koreans, ahead of the Chinese, ahead of the Caucasians like me. And what does it show? It shows that given the right opportunity, the Filipino can rise. And that's what I hope will happen here, that the poor will start to get that opportunity, because there's so much intelligence in the poor. Imagine I was born poor, single mother who was unemployed most of my childhood. And yet there were people in my country that helped me, and I was able to do extremely well. How many people like me are there in the Philippines that just don't get the opportunity? They don't get to try. And so I believe there are so many good reasons to believe in the Philippines. I try not to look too much at the problems. They are there. I'm not saying we should ignore them, definitely, but certainly not let them knock you off course to the point where you give up on the Philippines. I'm happy to be raising my kids here. In some ways, we could have an easier life back in England, but I want them to be proud of who they are as Filipinos and as British people too. And so I think it's important for us to just concentrate on the good that has not yet come to full bloom. You know, it says in the Bible, light shined in the darkness, and the darkness will never put it out. And so that's a verse that I remind myself of regularly, times when things seem difficult here. But I absolutely believe the Philippines is going to do great. I mean, I look back to when I first arrived, and in the first 10 years or so after I arrived, 2003 to maybe 2014, 15, things improved so dramatically. It was wonderful. And things have gone back a little bit recently, and especially because of COVID. But the Filipino never gives up. It's like you can have super typhoons, the biggest super typhoons in the world, earthquakes, volcanoes, COVID. It doesn't matter. We're still smiling.
Yes.
This kind of relentless wave of bad news, eventually slows down, so that I think just a few peaceful years, and this will be a very different country.
Just one more question, sir. Who's your who do you follow as a leader, or who's your leadership model? Who do you think should be that leadership model, or for you personally?
Well, honestly, personally, my model was my father-in-law. I'd never met anyone like him in my life. I've met royalty, the Queen of England, Prince Charles. I've met prime ministers, billionaires all over the world. I never met anyone like my father-in-law. And of course, back then he was not my father-in-law. He was just the head of Gawad Kalinga. And he taught me so much that I'd never heard. He taught me it's better to be loving than to be right. That blew my mind. All my life I'd been taught being wrong, getting something wrong, making a mistake on a test. These are mortal sins. And here he came saying it's better to be loving than to be right. And many other pieces of advice he gave me. And so I've learned a lot from the Philippines. And you're the most amazing people I've ever met. And I see some good young leaders here as well coming up. I hope they make it. I hope they get into higher positions and are able to influence a bigger part of the country.
All right. And I guess there's no more questions, sir?
Just a fun question.
Okay.
If you are to describe being a Filipino, what is it in you that you can describe as a Filipino? It could be a favorite dish or a habit or a mannerism or whatever.
In me, in me.
Yes, yes.
Well, I definitely have a pusong Pinoy, but English stomach. I'll never eat balut. I can't stand pancit. I was once on this road trip, this caravan, giving talks in different cities in America to Filipinos every night for 3 months, and every night I was given pancit, and I can't stand it anymore. Just the look of pancit. Just I don't want to be anywhere near it. But caldereta I like. Yeah, there are a lot of adobo I like. We regularly eat tinola and things like that here at home. Yeah. So yeah, and I think my height is more Filipino. So more Filipino.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, Myra.
All right, thank you, sir. And before you go, we'd like to present you with this e-certificate that we made for joining our class. So let me read. Certificate of Appreciation. This is presented to Mr. Dylan Wilk for being a guest speaker at the Ignatian Leadership MBA class held today, August 28, 2020. So once again, thank you so much for coming and joining our class and giving that talk to us. We'll be forever grateful. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. It's been my
Thank
privilege.
you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Sir Dylan.
Thank you. All right. Stop presenting.
Wow, wow, that was really such a great surprise. Now you had there. So I think there's no need to discuss further.
Yes,
No need to discuss further.
I think so.
Sir Rowie, I'm just curious, who invited him? Ikaw
Myra.
nag-invite? Si Myra.
Myra made a suntok na buwan invitation.
Okay.
Yes, and I just followed up. I thought na it was forwarded to him kasi ang sabi sa email, it will be forwarded to his executive secretary. And then apparently today lang pala yun na forward. That's why he said that he only got the invitation today at 3 p.m. So I emailed, sir, is it okay? So yes, so thank you. That was great.
Congratulations for inviting him. I just want to say a few comments, no, Rowie.
Yes, yes, yes.
I was so amazed now as to how he was so anong tawag niyan? I was so amazed as how he is so believing in us Filipinos. There was a great hope inside him that parang na-amaze lang ako that he's very appreciative of what we are as people, no, but not all of our leaders are like that. How I wish that all our leaders are appreciative as he is, seeing the goodness in the Filipino people, seeing para excited to see the best qualities to show. Parang sana lahat ng mga leaders natin ganun. At saka yung mga business leaders natin, sana ganun sila.
Yeah, indeed, it was really an honor, a privilege, to have listened to him sharing, because I was just expecting that the sharing would focus on the company, the experiences, but I was really surprised because it was more of a personal sharing of his conversion, of his conviction, of how he deals with people. So it was, I think it's more very, very, very powerful when a certain person would share about, no, would share from the heart than simply sharing about the company. So I think this makes this evening really, really such a special class because of his presence and because of his inspiration that he brought. And I've noticed also while listening to our guest speaker, parang you feel so inspired, you feel so uplifted, you feel that he truly has this genuine faith in the Filipino people and the capacity of the Filipino people, especially the poor, and to be able to listen that one and hearing that one, especially from an Englishman, from a foreigner, is doubly touching and striking. So I'm really thanking Group A to the group of Myra for bringing him to our class. I'm sure the other groups are already pressured, no, for your next report, but just do your best and pray also for your for the upcoming sessions. So anyway, Doc Mark, thank you for coming. Thank you for
Yeah, I'm also equally grateful, no, for being here. I just want to say, no, that this is the advantage of being in an online class.
yes,
It's not
yes.
difficult for us to invite somebody from outside Davao City, so we can
Yeah,
invite anybody from. I mean, that's the advantage of this online class, no. You can actually invite anybody who can actually share, no. So there's no limit to walang boundary, no, in terms of who to invite. So thank you so much, Rowie, and thank you for the group. Thank you. Nag-apil-apil jud ko din he.
uh,
Salamat kaayo.
thank you.
Thank you for joining,
Uh,
ma'am. Thank you.
okay.
Okay, so I don't want to hear anymore the further report because I think the group was really well.